I didn't know a $21 hourly wage could come with this much responsibility. Scheduling subcontractors, ordering materials, managing budgets, leading meetings with engineers and HOA boards, even training crews on new product installations. Yeah, I was doing it all. But my title? Project manager, sort of. My pay? Still stuck in the just glad to be here bracket. I'm Matilda, and 6 years ago, I couldn't tell a torque wrench from a toothbrush. I had no construction background, no formal education in the field, just a stubborn work ethic and a belief that hard work eventually pays off. I started out hauling materials and sweeping up debris on job sites, not because it was glamorous, but because I needed a job and I wanted to learn. Every night after work, I studied YouTube tutorials, trade manuals, blueprint reading. I devoured it all. I stayed late, came in early, asked the annoying questions nobody else bothered with, and slowly, people started to notice. 2 years in, they made me a foreman. I was proud. I thought I was on my way. That's around the time I started dating the owner's son. And yes, I know how that sounds. But this wasn't some climbing the ladder thing. We met outside of work. It was real. In fact, it was him who first told me, "You deserve more." Funny how that phrase stuck with me. My big break came when I was brought in to help manage a small renovation project for a 12-building, 120-unit condo complex. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just patching things up, but I treated it like it was a $1 million job. I kept everything tight: budget, timeline, safety, communication. And the HOA board? They loved me. They'd had 5 contractors in the past few years, and they told me, more than once, "You're the reason we trust your company again." That project turned into a $2.7 million contract. I became the face of our team, the person the board called directly whenever anything came up. And I wore every hat they handed me: superintendent, billing coordinator, field manager, tech trainer, all while getting paid like a glorified intern. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself, "It's experience. I'm learning. They'll come through." They said a raise was coming, that my growth would be recognized, that I was part of the family now. Family. That word started to feel like a leash. Because while I was busting my ass holding the company's biggest project together, I started to realize something. Everyone relied on me. Everyone praised me. But when it came time to talk about compensation, real compensation, not just compliments, the room suddenly got quiet. I thought maybe it was just timing. Maybe I needed to prove myself a little longer. Maybe next month. Maybe after this phase wraps up. Maybe after this meeting. But maybe kept stretching into silence. And silence, I've learned, is just another way of saying, be grateful for scraps. So I waited. I worked. I gave everything. And deep down, I think I always knew how this would end. But not even I could have predicted how fast things would spiral the moment I decided to walk away. After that first condo project, things moved fast. The board was thrilled with the results, and thanks to their glowing recommendations, the company landed a massive follow-up job in the same complex. Suddenly, I wasn't just a field lead. I was the unofficial face of the operation. The board called me directly. Engineers deferred to me. Subs waited for my go-ahead before touching a single nail. And yet, my paycheck didn't budge. Every month, I handled the site schedule, coordinated with vendors, processed invoices, updated progress reports, and led walkthroughs with the HOA board. I submitted detailed forecasts, trained our subcontractors when we brought in new product lines, and even drafted bid responses for upcoming jobs. I wasn't just wearing multiple hats. I was wearing the whole damn closet. I was working 12-hour days, sometimes more, driving my own truck to job sites, covering gas, covering lunches for the team when morale dipped, solving problems that weren't mine to solve, and all for $21 an hour. I kept telling myself, be patient, it'll come. A raise, a bonus, some kind of thank you. I wasn't asking for the moon, just a livable wage. I'd even been promised a raise a year ago. They said it would be tied to my performance. Well, performance-wise, I'd blown every expectation out of the water. And still, nothing. Then came the company-wide meeting. I'll never forget it. We were all gathered in the break room. My project was highlighted as the company's biggest win of the year. The owner, my boyfriend's father, stood at the front, beaming with pride. This is what happens when you manage efficiently. Under budget, ahead of schedule. This is the kind of work we need more of, he said, waving a report in his hand with my numbers on it. People clapped. Some even looked my way and nodded. And then, minutes later, he passed out envelopes with our Christmas bonuses. Mine wasn't in the stack. I thought maybe it had been misplaced. Maybe I'd get it privately. So I waited. Nothing. Finally, I asked, straight up. His response? You've already been compensated in experience. You should be grateful to have this kind of responsibility so early in your career. My hands were literally shaking. Grateful? For being squeezed dry and patted on the head like a loyal pet? I didn't say much in that moment, just nodded, walked out of his office, and sat in my truck for almost an hour, staring at the dash. I wasn't just underpaid, I was being used. And the worst part? It wasn't by some cold corporate monster, it was by someone I was supposed to call family. Someone who sat across from me at dinner, who toasted my birthday last month, who asked when I planned to make it official with his son. Now I couldn't stop asking myself, was the relationship real or just another form of leverage? The lines had blurred. And the respect? That was long gone. Something inside me had shifted. I was done waiting. After that meeting, something inside me, quietly but permanently, unplugged. I still ran the job. I still wore the hard hat, gave the pep talks, reviewed the specs, dealt with inspectors, and played therapist to angry homeowners. On the surface, I was fine. Productive, professional, focused. But underneath? I was running on fumes and fury. Every day, I walked into that site knowing I was the backbone of a multi-million-dollar project, and I was being paid less than a junior assistant PM at any half-decent firm. My truck was still my office. My phone bill still carried the weight of company calls. And worst of all, my silence was being mistaken for consent. The $2.7 million project was on track to wrap soon. The board was thrilled. They told me, almost embarrassingly often, that I was the reason they stuck with our company. That before me, they'd cycled through 5 contractors in 3 years. That they finally felt safe and heard. I smiled and thanked them, but their praise felt like salt in an open wound, because I knew what was waiting back at the office. More demands, more expectations, and zero acknowledgement. Then came the next blow. The HOA had extended a bid invitation for an additional $3 million in renovations. Same complex, just the next phase of the development. And guess who they requested, by name, to manage it? Me. The bid package had my name all over it. Notes I'd written, scopes I'd defined, timelines I'd drafted. But when the conversation came up internally about the new job, my name was never mentioned. At least, not in the way I'd hoped. During a leadership huddle, the owner leaned back in his chair and said, "We'll keep things lean on this one. Matilda already knows the site inside out, so no need to bring in anyone else." Like I was a line item on a budget sheet. Not a person, not even an employee, just a convenient asset. I couldn't hold it in anymore. That afternoon, I knocked on his office door and laid it out, calmly but directly. I reminded him of the raise he'd promised over a year ago. I listed every function I currently covered. I presented market research showing what project managers in our region were being paid, almost double what I was making. I told him I wasn't here to beg, but I needed to know if this company saw me as a real asset or just free labor with a smile. He didn't even blink. "Matilda," he said, folding his hands like a preacher about to deliver a sermon, "what you're gaining here in knowledge and experience is more valuable than any salary we could offer. You're investing in your future. You're becoming indispensable. I stared at him. Indispensable? To whom? A man who wouldn't give me a Christmas bonus? A company that called me part of the family until money entered the room? You're like a daughter to me, he added. And there it was, the guilt trip, the manipulation wrapped in faux affection. Like I should be honored to be exploited because it came with a side of familiarity. I left that office with my blood boiling, and when I told my boyfriend what had happened, expecting maybe some backup, he just sighed. Babe, my dad's old school. You know how he is. I looked at him and realized something horrible. He wasn't surprised. He'd known this entire time what I was dealing with, and he'd chosen to say nothing, do nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision I'd made over the past few years. Every weekend I'd skipped seeing my friends. Every time I'd eaten dinner in my truck instead of going home. Every ounce of myself I'd poured into that job, believing loyalty would eventually be rewarded. It was dawning on me, painfully, slowly, that I had let these people define my worth. And worse, I had started to believe them, no more. The next morning, I pulled up my resume. I hadn't touched it in years. But as I stared at the screen, something in me clicked. It was time to stop hoping they'd change. It was time to remember who the hell I was. Once I updated my resume, everything changed. Not on the outside. I still showed up to the site, led the meetings, smiled for the HOA board. But inside, I was different. I wasn't hoping anymore. I wasn't waiting. I was watching, calculating. And most importantly, I was ready. It didn't take long. Within a week of putting my profile up, I got a call from a recruiter. Then 2, then 5. Apparently, when you've got 6 years of field experience, have run multi-million-dollar jobs solo, and come with glowing reviews from clients, people notice. One company, in particular, stood out. They weren't just offering me a job. They were offering me respect, in the form of an $80,000 salary, full benefits, paid time off, quarterly bonuses, a company truck, laptop, mobile Wi-Fi, and a remote work option for out-of-state projects. I read the offer twice, then a third time, and then I cried. Not because I was overwhelmed, though I was, but because for the first time in 6 years, I felt seen, truly, undeniably seen. You were never the problem, Matilda, the hiring manager told me on our second call. You were just in the wrong place. That hit hard. Because deep down, I'd spent so long believing I was too emotional, too ambitious, too young, too demanding. But I wasn't too anything. I was just done being undervalued. Still, I didn't quit right away. I had one more thing to do. Friday morning, I printed the offer and placed it in a sealed envelope. Walked into the office like it was any other day. My soon-to-be ex-boss was in his usual seat, joking with his partner about profit margins and lean teams. I waited until the room quieted, then slid the envelope across his desk. "What's this?" he asked, almost annoyed. "Read it," I said, steady. He opened it, and I watched the color drain from his face. Silence. And then, finally, "This is a lot of money." I nodded. "It is. And it's what I've earned." He scrambled. Told me we could talk numbers next week. That he'd always seen potential in me. That maybe we could restructure something. Just give him time. But he was already too late. You see, respect doesn't come on layaway. I gave him my formal resignation letter right after. No theatrics, no anger, just the facts. I was done. My last day would be in 2 weeks. That same afternoon, I called the president of the HOA board, the man whose trust I'd built over years of tireless work. When I told him I wouldn't be managing the next phase of construction, there was a long pause. "You're the reason we stuck with this company," he said. "I need to speak with your bosses. Today." And just like that, the ground began to shift. They didn't see it coming. They thought I'd stay forever. That I'd keep saying yes, keep sacrificing, keep pretending family was a valid reason to be treated like I didn't matter. But the truth is, when someone shows you they don't value you, believe them the first time. I just wish I'd believed them sooner. By Monday morning, the office was in full-blown panic mode. Apparently, the HOA president hadn't just spoken to the owners. He'd marched into their office, laid out a list of concerns, and made it crystal clear. If I wasn't overseeing the next phase of construction, the $3 million contract would be put under review. And that's corporate speak for, we're ready to walk. Suddenly, the same man who told me I was like a daughter couldn't look me in the eye without twitching. His partner, who'd always kept a neutral stance, pulled me aside in the hallway and said quietly, "We didn't realize how much weight you carried with that board. That's on us." No kidding. By Tuesday, I was being asked to reconsider. They didn't offer an apology, not directly, but they floated vague ideas about compensation packages, future leadership roles, long-term vision. I could see them grasping at straws, trying to patch a boat that had already sunk. Honestly, I didn't expect the fallout to be this fast, or this visible. For years I'd been made to feel small, replaceable, like I should be lucky to have a seat at the table, but the moment I stepped away, that whole table shook. Wow! So this is what leverage feels like. I played it cool. "I appreciate the conversation," I told them, "but I've already accepted another offer." Their faces tightened. I could see it registering. This wasn't just a bluff. I wasn't negotiating. I was gone. Later that day, I got a message from the HOA board president. He asked if I'd be willing to join their meeting with my company that afternoon. "We'd like you present, just to clarify your role and future availability," he said. I knew what that really meant. They wanted to make sure I wasn't being forced out. I showed up in a plain black blazer, no company logo on my shirt. Just me. The meeting was tense from the start. The HOA president laid it out bluntly. "Matilda has been our primary point of contact for nearly 3 years. Her leadership is the reason we extended the invitation for this next phase. If she's not managing the project, we'll be opening the bid to other contractors." Dead. Silence. The owner cleared his throat. We were under the impression Matilda was staying on." I looked at him directly. "That's not correct. I submitted my formal resignation on Friday. 2 weeks' notice. My last day is next Friday." The shift in the room was immediate. You could feel the tension snap. The board members exchanged glances. One of them actually muttered, "Well, that changes things." I kept my tone calm, professional, but inside, I was stunned. All this time, I thought I was just another cog in the machine. Turns out, I was the damn engine. After the meeting, the company's co-owner caught up with me in the parking lot. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "I know things haven't been fair. If I'd had more say, maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But for what it's worth, I think you made the right call." I nodded. "I know I did." I drove back to the job site with my windows down, the wind in my face, and for the first time in a long time, peace in my chest. Not revenge, not arrogance, just peace. Because here's the truth they never saw coming. When you build something with your bare hands, brick by brick, day by day, you don't need anyone's permission to walk away with your head high. They thought I'd go quietly. They thought I'd be grateful. They thought I'd keep playing the loyal employee while they raked in profits on my back. But I didn't leave in bitterness. I left in power. Within a week of that meeting, the HOA board formally withdrew the $3 million invitation. Their statement was brief but cutting. "Due to staffing changes and a shift in project leadership, we will be reopening the bidding process." I didn't have to read between the lines. Neither did anyone else. At the office, the mood shifted from panic to damage control. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Phones were slammed. Blame circled like vultures. The owner, my former boss and almost father-in-law, stopped showing up entirely for a few days. When he did return, he barely acknowledged anyone. I guess when the empire starts to crack, even the king hides. His business partner wasn't so quiet. Word got around that he'd confronted him behind closed doors, furious that personal pride had cost them a multi-million-dollar job. "You lost us the board's trust," he was overheard saying. "You let your ego run the damn company." Honestly, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt detached. The fall wasn't mine to witness. I was already walking in a new direction. My last day came faster than I expected. The guys from the field, subs, crew leads, even the delivery drivers, threw me a goodbye lunch in the lot. Nothing fancy, just some tacos, folding chairs, and too many stories that started with, "Remember that time when Matilda?" They made me laugh. They made me cry. For the first time, I realized how many people I'd quietly impacted. I wasn't just managing buildings. I'd helped build trust, culture, belief. Even the co-owner stopped by, pulled me aside. "I wish we'd done better by you," he said, sincere. "You deserved more than what you got." I smiled, not bitter. "I know. That's why I left." As for my boyfriend, we didn't make it. In the weeks that followed, we tried to salvage things, but it became clear he had been too willing to stay silent when it mattered most. He wasn't cruel, just complicit, and that hurt in its own quiet way. One night over dinner, I asked him, "If it had been you, treated like that for years, would you have stayed?" He looked down at his plate. "No." That was our last meal together. Sometimes the real heartbreak isn't when someone wrongs you, it's when someone you love watches it happen and does nothing. I moved out that weekend, packed up my books, my tools, my pride, and didn't look back. Now I sit at my new desk, my name on the door, laptop open, benefits already active, and I can't help but breathe deeper. This isn't revenge, this is resolution. Because the best way to leave a place that never valued you is to rise so far above it, they can't even see your heels. 2 months later, my new company assigned me to a project just 30 minutes away from the condo complex I'd managed for years. When I pulled into the site, I caught a glimpse of the old logo, my old company's logo, on a pickup truck across the street. Apparently, they'd landed a smaller job nearby, a quick fix-up for a commercial strip mall. I didn't think much of it until the following week, when the HOA president from the condo board reached out. "Just wanted to check in," he said. "We've officially signed with another firm for the new phase. You'll never guess who won the bid." I laughed. "Try me," and he said the name. It was my new company. I was stunned. I hadn't even been involved in the proposal. We had separate regional teams for bidding. I asked him why they made the switch. His voice was calm but firm. "Because we trust you. And we trust the company that saw your value when the last one didn't." That was it. No drama, no announcement, just a quiet, final shift in power. The project, now valued at over $3.5 million, would start the following quarter. And while I wouldn't be leading it, I'd be brought in as an advisor. Talk about full circle. I kept things professional, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. Not out of revenge, but out of clarity. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's watching the people who underestimated you realize they handed you the match, and you built an empire instead of burning down their house. From what I heard, the fallout at my old company got worse. Word spread in the local construction circles. Clients started to ask questions. Subcontractors hesitated. A few even reached out to me on LinkedIn, asking if I'd landed somewhere else and whether there were openings. It turns out reputation moves faster than any press release. As for me, I'm just getting started. There's something liberating about walking into a room and no longer needing to prove you belong there. You've already done the work. Your story speaks louder than your title ever could. I look back now and realize every late night, every ignored request, every maybe next month that never came. It wasn't wasted. It built me. It showed me what I would never tolerate again. And most importantly, it taught me this. If they don't see your value, stop arguing. Start walking. Someone else will recognize what they were too blind to appreciate. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say isn't, "I deserve better." It's, "Watch me prove it." I knew something inside me had cracked the moment I watched Ethan stroll back from his second 2-hour innovation lunch of the week. He had a quinoa salad balanced in one hand, a cold brew in the other, and not a single line of code or project sheet open on his laptop. Meanwhile, I was trapped in hour 10 of back-to-back Teams calls, juggling 3 compliance audits and covering for a junior associate who had walked out mid-shift in tears. Ethan's only contribution that day was forwarding my report to the CFO, scrubbing my name like it was a typo, and slapping his initials on top. By the time I finished cleaning up a dataset that looked like it had been chewed up and spit out by a raccoon with Excel, the clock glowed 8:50 p.m. The janitor at Sterling Financial's headquarters had started whistling a tune that grated on my nerves. Some old country song about freedom that felt more like mockery. I stood up to stretch, and my eyes landed on Ethan's empty desk. Not a coffee stain, not a single sticky note out of place. Just a neat scribble from his son taped to the monitor. "Best dad ever." I almost laughed. It's remarkable how quickly you disappear when you're reliable. People start assuming you enjoy staying late, that you thrive on cleaning up their messes, that you don't mind watching someone who once spelled liability as liability get praised for insights you bled over. And for a while, I told myself it wasn't worth the drama. Keep my head down, keep moving. But deep down, I knew I was lying. Sometimes moments like that can weigh on you more than you realize. Before we dive deeper, take a few short steps around your room. It clears the tension better than you'd expect. Now tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in the very place you worked the hardest. Ethan was the type who said, "Let's revisit," instead of, "I forgot." The type who printed my project roadmap, stapled it, and strutted into the conference room like he'd invented the plan himself. Every time I sat outside a glass wall, running damage control, he was inside basking in fluorescent applause. That night, as I stared at the spreadsheet glowing on my screen, the exhaustion in my chest turned into something sharper. Not anger, not yet. Just the dull ache of recognition. I wasn't just invisible, I was being erased. How bitter that day. I also received information about a 67% salary cut to save costs, while I was the one who devoted myself, brought in hundreds of valuable contracts, but my efforts were not recognized. When the email popped into my inbox, I already knew what it would say. Ethan's subject lines were always short, smug, and predictable. Great stuff. I'll take it from here, that was it. No mention of the 6 months I'd spent building the cost optimization framework from the ground up. No acknowledgement of the late nights in the Sterling Financial office, when the only light was the glow of my monitor and the occasional sweep of the security guard's flashlight. Just those 7 words, stamped with finality, as if the entire initiative had sprung from his forehead, like some corporate Athena. What he thought he had was a spreadsheet. What I'd created was a blueprint, a living, breathing overhaul that cut through years of wasteful contracts and restructured the company's entire expense lattice. I renegotiated vendor rates with contacts he didn't even know existed, automated reporting processes that once drained entire weekends, and streamlined workflows across compliance and procurement. The savings weren't abstract. They were real, traceable, millions shaved from quarterly costs, projected in neat, color-coded charts that even a child could follow. But Ethan didn't see systems. He saw shortcuts. He saw a polished deck that he could flash at the executive team. Buzzwords he could butcher into sound bites. Transformational realignment, scalable savings, radical vision. It made my stomach twist. I could already picture him in that glass-walled boardroom, leaning back in his chair, pretending the questions were directed at him while parroting phrases I had carefully written. Still, this time was different. This time, I wasn't Marcus, the IT lead whose automation scripts Ethan had paraded around last spring until Marcus drowned his humiliation at happy hour. I wasn't Dana, who sobbed in the stairwell after Ethan recycled her supplier diversification proposal 2 weeks after publicly shutting it down. I wasn't going to collapse or cry, because this time, I'd saved everything: Slack threads, email chains, vendor call transcripts. I had a timeline that traced every decision straight back to me. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the blueprint he'd stolen was laced with receipts. I stared at his email until the words blurred. My pulse steadied, slow and deliberate. I wasn't just tired anymore. I was calculating if Ethan wanted to take it from here. Fine. I would let him walk into the spotlight, and when the lights were brightest, I'd be the one holding the switch. I didn't storm into anyone's office. I didn't send a reply dripping with sarcasm. Instead, I printed Ethan's email on paper, not screenshot, not digital copy, paper, because I'd learned a long time ago that servers crash, inboxes get accidentally wiped, and version histories can be mysteriously corrupted. But paper lives. I slid the printout into a manila folder in my desk drawer, alongside old HR policies and benefit forms no one ever reads. To anyone else, it looked like clutter. To me, it was insurance. Next, I opened the shared drive and exported the slide deck he thought he owned. Every single edit, timestamp, and formula cell carried my digital fingerprints. He might have polished my bullet points, but he couldn't erase the metadata that screamed my name with every keystroke. The drive's version history looked like a courtroom transcript. 98% of changes made by Reed O. Only 2 by Harper E. One of which was formatting a title in bold Comic Sans. Quickly undone by me. Slack was even better. Buried in public threads were endless exchanges with my team. Discussions of vendor rates, cost model revisions, and compliance workarounds. Each message time-stamped, each tied to my account. There was even a gem of a direct message from Ethan himself. "I'll leave all the number stuff to you. Oh, LOL. Visionary leadership, right? Outsourcing financial modeling with an LOL. I wasn't finished. Our contract platform, DocuVault, logged every vendor agreement. Each deal had my digital signature initiating negotiations, my login tied to draft reviews, my credentials attached to final sign-offs. Ethan's involvement? A single green checkmark on approvals. Rubber stamping work he didn't understand. By the time I was done collecting, my archive was ironclad. Emails, Slack logs, contracts, version histories. It wasn't just proof of my authorship, it was a trail, clean and undeniable. Ethan thought he'd stolen a shiny presentation. What he didn't realize was that the project itself stretched across 4 departments and required approvals that all led back to me, without my name, without my chain of custody. The numbers weren't just meaningless, they were fraudulent. Still, I didn't think of it as revenge, not yet. This was survival. After 14 years at Sterling Financial, I knew better than to trust recognition to come on its own. Visibility in corporate life wasn't earned. It was engineered, and if Ethan wanted to erase me, I'd make sure the erasure left scars. That night, I forwarded a compressed folder to my personal email. Subject line: Insurance. File names: Innocuous. Vendor notes: DexULSX. Revised budget final.pdf. 4 personal use.docx. Nothing to raise alarms. Everything to save my career if the storm broke. And deep down, I felt it coming, the shift in the air before thunder. That heavy stillness that warns you something is about to crack. Ethan's theft wasn't new, but this time, I wasn't empty-handed, I was building a vault. And when the time came, I'd decide who got the key. The auditorium lights dimmed, like we were about to watch a movie instead of sit through another quarterly town hall. Rows of folding chairs lined the room. Lukewarm coffee and steel dispensers at the back, and stale cookies no one wanted. I slipped into a seat near the exit, already rehearsing an excuse in case I needed to escape. Something about a procurement fire drill, which really meant hiding in the stairwell with noise-canceling headphones. Then Ethan walked on stage, strutting, smiling, the kind of grin you practice in the mirror when you're sure the world owes you applause. "Excited to share something game-changing with you all," he began, holding the clicker like a maestro's baton. "It's a new cost optimization strategy we piloted this quarter. Transformational vision, radical savings, scalable results." My chest tightened. I knew those words, not because I'd heard them before, but because I'd written them, carefully, painfully, over 6 months of endless revisions. And then the slide deck appeared on the screen. My slide deck. Not a version, not an edit, but the exact file I'd sent him. Same font, same formatting, even the little gear icon I'd tossed in at the last minute to make the title page look executive-friendly. He hadn't even bothered to fix the typo in analysis. Cost analysis. That error was mine. A note to myself to update later. Seeing it glowing on the 10-foot projector screen felt like being punched in the gut. I sat frozen, hands wrapped around the disposable coffee cup in my lap, as Ethan clicked through each chart. He butchered the explanations, reducing carefully balanced models into slogans. Less spend, more win. Efficiency at scale. He had no idea what the ratios meant, no clue how fragile the projections were, or how many departments had signed off on every single number. And yet, there he was, conducting a symphony he hadn't composed. The CEO sat in the front row, nodding like a bobblehead in a summer car ride. By the time Ethan finished, the room erupted in applause. "Phenomenal initiative, Ethan," the CEO said, clapping him on the back. "Visionary leadership." I clenched my cup so hard the lid popped, scalding coffee spilling across my skirt. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, painted and stiff, as everyone around me cheered for the fraud standing on stage. It wasn't just theft. That realization hit me like a freight train as the applause rang out. This wasn't Ethan stealing credit again. This was him putting his name on financial data tied directly to shareholders. Numbers that crossed SEC disclosure thresholds. It wasn't just betrayal, it was potential securities fraud, broadcast live to employees and investors. And in that instant, my rage cooled into something sharper, cleaner. Ethan thought he'd humiliated me. What he'd really done was dig his own grave. All I had to do was decide when to hand over the shovel. What about you? Tell me, what moment stood out most to you so far? Do you think Ophelia is about to finally snap? Or will Ethan make another move before the storm hits? Drop your guesses in the comments, and stick with me until the very end. You won't want to miss how this story explodes. The applause still echoed in my ears long after the town hall ended. Ethan strutted off stage, glowing with praise, shaking hands, and soaking in compliments that weren't his. But all I could hear was the sharp click in my brain when I realized he hadn't just stolen my work. He had tied his name to numbers that triggered compliance thresholds. At Sterling Financial, projections weren't harmless guesses. They were disclosures, tied to investor calls, quarterly reports, and yes, regulators, which meant that when Ethan slapped his name on my blueprint and paraded it in front of the company, he crossed a line from arrogance into fraud. I didn't need to embellish. I didn't need revenge fantasies. I had rules, clauses, and paper trails on my side. I pulled up the finance handbook that night, scrolling straight to section 4.2.6, the one buried deep in compliance fine print. Any executive communication of financial projections must be traceable to documented approvals from project originators. Failure to comply may constitute misrepresentation reportable to the SEC. There it was. In black and white, Ethan had just built his promotion on a crime. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't about bruised pride anymore. This was leverage. Ethan thought he'd silenced me, erased me, but in reality, he'd left me holding the detonator. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Operation Keystone. Inside, I saved everything: the cost models, the change logs, the vendor emails, every Slack thread where I explained methodology in painful detail. Each file was an anchor, proof that the blueprint was mine and mine alone. Ethan could delete his emails, clear his cache, maybe even beg IT for a clean slate. None of it mattered. I had copies, time-stamped and backed up beyond his reach. The rage that had once burned hot inside me now felt cold, precise. A storm system shifting from thunder to lightning. I didn't need to scream or throw coffee cups across the room. All I had to do was prepare the ground and wait for the strike. But one question lingered. When the storm hit, would I be standing on solid ground or buried in the rubble? Ethan had allies. He knew how to spin a story, how to smile at the right people. The CEO liked him, trusted him. If I came forward too soon, I might get framed as bitter, ungrateful, or worse, disloyal. Timing mattered. So, I did what I always did best. I documented, quietly and relentlessly. And for the first time in 14 years, I felt something stirring beneath the exhaustion. It wasn't hope. It was clarity. The kind that comes when you realize your enemy isn't clever enough to notice you're already 10 steps ahead. By Monday morning, Ethan was already basking in his new title, Executive Strategic Advisor, like it meant something more than a padded line on his resume. The office buzzed with congratulations, Slack channels filled with clapping emojis, and the CEO paraded him through meetings as if he'd single-handedly saved Sterling Financial from collapse. Meanwhile, my name had vanished. Again. But this time, I wasn't nursing bitterness in silence. I had a card. Literally, last year. During a mandatory compliance training, most employees scrolled Instagram under the table while the instructor droned on about disclosure protocols. Not me. I had stayed after the session, peppering the guest speaker with questions about vendor loopholes. His name was Jonathan Meeks, former federal auditor, late 50s, gray buzz cut, black suit that looked like it had been issued by the government itself. He was the kind of man who said audit trail like it was scripture. Before he left, he handed me his card. If you ever see something that doesn't smell right, call me. Well, Jonathan, it stank. That night, I dug through an old notebook and found his card still tucked between scribbled logistics notes. My thumb hesitated over the phone number. I'd spent 14 years at Sterling playing the reliable soldier. Was I really about to turn my company's golden boy into a regulatory case study? Yes. Yes, I was. I dialed. He answered on the third ring, his voice clipped, professional. Meeks. Hi, Mr. Meeks, I said, my throat dry. You probably don't remember me. Ophelia Reed, operations lead at Sterling Financial. We met last year at the compliance seminar. A pause. Then, Reed, you asked about vendor reporting clauses. He remembered. I think I have a situation you may want to look at, I said. Internal misrepresentation of financial projections. I have documentation. He didn't ask for the gory details. He didn't indulge my emotions. He simply said, email it to me. Encrypted subject line, training follow-up. I'll take it from there. When I hung up, adrenaline rushed through me, sharp and intoxicating, not fear, anticipation. The kind of buzz you feel just before a controlled demolition, when the wires are set and all that's left is the countdown. The next morning, I forwarded him a compressed folder, contracts, Slack threads, version logs, my blueprint. Nothing flashy, just facts, cold and undeniable. Then I sat at my desk, poured burnt coffee into a chipped mug, and watched Ethan swagger past my cubicle, whistling some pop tune. Convinced he'd won. He had no idea. He thought the game was his, but I just invited a referee he couldn't charm. Bribe? Or gaslight? For the first time in months, I allowed myself a small smile, because I hadn't just documented the theft, I'd escalated it. And now, Ethan wasn't just my problem anymore. He was the SEC's. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. By Wednesday, I noticed Ethan hovering outside my cubicle more than usual, pretending to stir sugar into his coffee while sneaking glances at my screen. His swagger had softened, replaced with a twitch in his jaw and a sheen of sweat that even the over-air-conditioned office couldn't hide. That afternoon, he cornered me in one of the glass-walled meeting rooms, shutting the door like we were about to discuss nuclear codes. "Ophelia," he began with that practiced cool boss tone. "I know things have been intense lately. You've been crushing it." He leaned forward, clasping his hands like a coach offering encouragement. "I wanted to talk to you about some stretch opportunities." Stretch opportunities. The corporate code for, "I need you to do more of the real work while I polish my halo." He launched into a pitch about a new project, realigning vendor operations in the Southeast region, reporting directly to him. "Of course. This could be huge for your trajectory here," he said, sweat glistening near his temple. His voice cracked just enough to betray the panic beneath the performance. I kept my face still, practiced neutrality, hiding the thrill racing under my skin. I knew what this was. A bribe dressed up as career development. Ethan had caught the scent of something shifting. Maybe it was the legal team whispering behind closed doors. Maybe it was Meeks moving pieces on the compliance chessboard. Either way, he was spooked. I let him finish his pitch, then gave him the same answer I once used to turn down a date to a monster truck rally. "No, thank you." No explanation, no apology. Just those 3 words. The silence that followed stretched across the table like a chasm. For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan didn't have a slick comeback. His forced chuckle died halfway out of his throat. "Well, we'll circle back," he muttered. But the crack in his voice betrayed him. I walked out with my spine straight, leaving him to marinate in his own unease. That was the thing about power. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was as simple as refusing to play the role they expected. By the time I reached my desk, an email from him was already waiting. "Just checking in. Excited to collaborate soon." Too many exclamation points, the desperate kind. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The second he offered me that fake promotion, the second he assumed I was desperate to stay, he'd already lost. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened my encrypted archive one more time. Every document, every message, every file was there. Ready. The knives were sharpened. Ethan didn't know what I was planning, but he knew I was planning something, and that was enough to make him sweat. The morning I decided to pull the pin, the sky hung gray over Sterling's glass tower, making the building look less like an office and more like a mausoleum. Fitting, I thought. A tomb for careers like mine. Loyal, invisible, disposable. I arrived 50 minutes earlier than usual. No one notices when you're early. They only notice when you're gone. My desk was spotless. Personal effects already boxed the night before and tucked into the trunk of my car. My files were backed up, encrypted, archived 3 different ways. Today wasn't about scrambling for safety. Today was about precision. I logged into Outlook and opened a blank email. Subject line, "Resignation, Ophelia Reed." The body was as dry as sandpaper. "Dear team, please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation. Effective immediately. I appreciate the opportunities to contribute over the past 14 years and wish Sterling Financial continued success. Regards, Ophelia Reed." No nostalgia, no thank yous for mentorship, just facts. A scalpel of words. Then came the CCs, HR's general inbox, protocol, my direct manager, Julia, respect. And finally, Jonathan Meeks, compliance. That was the payload. One polite resignation, camouflaged as routine, with a carbon copy to the one man who had both the authority and appetite to dismantle Sterling's golden boy. My finger hovered for a breath, not from hesitation, but from gravity. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, not afraid of falling, but aware of the weight of the leap. Then I clicked send. No dramatic exits, no slamming doors. I shut my laptop, slid it into the docking station, grabbed my coat, and walked out. Ethan's office door was ajar as I passed. He was pacing, headset on, performing his negotiator routine, all hand gestures and raised eyebrows. I didn't look in. By the time he opened his inbox, I'd be halfway across the park, sipping a coffee from a food truck where the barista thought cinnamon was the cure for everything. The adrenaline wasn't panic, it was clean, euphoric, like jet fuel burning through my veins. 14 years of swallowing pride and late-night exhaustion, gone with one click. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for replies. The beauty of a resignation bomb isn't the explosion. It's the silence right after, when you know the fuse is burning in someone else's hands. And this fuse carried a message hidden in plain sight. You tried to erase me. Now you've left me no choice but to make myself unforgettable. I stood at the edge of the park as the wind whipped past my collar, watching the leaves swirl like debris from a controlled demolition. I wasn't watching Sterling burn. I was simply waiting to hear the sirens. Monday morning hit like a sledgehammer dipped in bleach. I was still in bed, half listening to the weather report drone about scattered showers, when my phone lit up with a cascade of notifications. Julia, my old manager, at 7:41 a.m. What did you do? Brian from Analytics, at 7:43 a.m. Ethan's locked in the main conference room with legal. Security walked him in, not allowed to leave. An anonymous number, 7:50 a.m. CFO just canceled his Caribbean vacation. Whole thing's a mess. I scrolled through the chaos while sipping my coffee, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. I hadn't even left the apartment yet, and already the fuse had reached the dynamite. By 8:12 a.m., Carol from payroll chimed in. You didn't just burn the bridge, Ophelia. You nuked the whole damn interstate. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my mug. At 10 o'clock a.m., a company-wide calendar invite appeared in my inbox. Mandatory all hands. Emergency session. Host, CEO. Location, main conference room and overflow Zoom. Ethan hadn't lasted 72 hours in his shiny new title. The moment he tried to purge his inbox that morning, IT flagged anomalies. Too bad our infrastructure auto-synced with the compliance audit server every 12 hours. Better yet, I'd already submitted immutable, time-locked versions of every relevant file to Meeks, complete with cryptographic hashes. Ethan thought he was erasing footprints. What he was really doing was digging a crater. By noon, Sterling Financial was in meltdown mode. Legal aides marched through the hallways carrying binders. The CFO canceled meetings. The CEO's assistant hovered outside the frosted glass conference room like she was guarding a vault of radioactive shame. Inside, shadows paced and gestured wildly. I didn't join the meeting. I didn't need to. I simply walked past the building around 1 o'clock p.m., coffee in hand, and watched from across the street. Through the glass, I could see Ethan's silhouette, arms flailing, his once polished composure unraveling thread by thread. The CEO's voice later echoed across the company on Zoom. He looked pale, drained, as if someone had siphoned the bravado out of him. Effective immediately, he said, reading from a script. A member of our executive team has been suspended pending external audit and regulatory review. This action is not a judgment, but a precautionary measure involving financial disclosures presented at the recent town hall. He didn't say Ethan's name. He didn't have to. Slack lit up like fireworks. Holy shit. Did you see this coming? Ophelia must have had a hand in it. The collective gasp of a workforce realizing the golden boy had finally tripped his own wire. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and let the sun warm my face. 14 years of being erased, silenced, and sidelined. And now the same system that ignored me was tearing Ethan apart piece by piece. I hadn't leaked to the press. I hadn't raised my voice. I'd just told the truth to the right person at the right time. The rest, the collapse, the panic, The 3.7 million shaped crater. That was the company's own doing. By Tuesday afternoon, the company's polished image had crumbled. Emails flew like shrapnel. Rumors sprinted down every hallway. And then, the final confirmation landed in my inbox. Subject: Request for voluntary participation, regulatory inquiry. From Michael Renair, CEO. Sterling Financial, CC. Jonathan Meeks. Secure compliance. We are reaching out to formally request your cooperation in an ongoing investigation into financial misrepresentation and internal policy violations. Your name has been referenced as the project lead on materials previously attributed elsewhere. We would appreciate your assistance in ensuring a complete and accurate understanding of the facts. I didn't click the scheduling link. I didn't need to. The message itself was enough. 14 years of being overlooked, scrubbed from reports, watching others step into the spotlight with my work. And now my name sat at the center of an inquiry that had executives trembling. I closed my laptop and let the quiet wash over me. For once. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was liberation. Ethan was suspended. The CEO's polished mask had cracked, and the board was bracing for fallout that could cost millions. And me? I had already walked away. That night, I booked a flight to the coast, somewhere with salt in the air. No Slack notifications, no calendar invites, no fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. For 2 weeks, the only deadlines I planned to honor were spa appointments printed on resort stationery. As I zipped my suitcase, I realized something profound. I had never needed to set the fire. All I had to do was stop putting it out. And now I'll ask you, what part of this story struck you the most? Did you expect Ophelia's quiet resignation to hit harder than a scream? How do you think the CEO will survive the $3.7 million fallout? If at all, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated, hit like, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because sometimes the quietest moves are the ones that shake the world.